Stepped out of my zone. I had to get out alone and figure it out on my own. And I know what I really want now. Can't stop me, can't break.
Hello, animation fans, and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. I'm your host, Larry Vasquez, and you're listening to episode number 60. In this episode, we have two guests that will be joining us, two of our alumni, Stephen Johnson and Humberto Rosa. They're two of our alumni who were able to work on the ultra cool Into the Spider-Verse. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, hopefully you'll be able to see it soon. So it was really a neat opportunity, not only to talk with some of our alumni and see where they're at, but to talk with these guys who have been able to work on a game changer in many ways to our industry. It was just a very, very neat film. And to also talk to them from kind of a different perspective. This was Stephen Johnson's first full feature, animated feature, and Humberto Rosa, who was a lead animator on this film. So it was just really cool to be able to talk with our alumni on a cool film and from a unique perspective. So let's join them. All right. Uh-oh. That was Humberto. Okay. So Humberto, you said you were hanging out. Okay. Hopefully it's not on my end. Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. All right. So let's jump into this. Again, I really just appreciate you guys' time. It's always a neat opportunity, excuse me, to get guys like you in on this. Obviously, Into the Spider-Verse made a huge splash. And so when we can get guys like you, who have also been our alumni, to jump in on this and kind of get a little bit of a behind the scenes and also kind of your journey, it's just a really unique opportunity. So really, I just appreciate you guys' time.
Of course. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So as I mentioned before, this is kind of take two. We had a little technical difficulty, so I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. But I've got pages of questions that were asked online. I put it out there, mentioned I was going to be interviewing you guys, and so, hey, any questions you guys got, hit me up. And we had a great response. So half of my job's already done. So that's pretty cool. But I always like kind of, we're all unique. We all come from kind of different backgrounds. And so I always like kind of hearing how you came into animation. You obviously, you guys have both gone through iAnimate. And so maybe what made that decision there out of iAnimate, kind of how you maneuvered over to where you're at now. So let's start with you, Humberto. How
Sure.
you came into animation?
I didn't plan. It's kind of weird because I always loved animation as a kid. I always used to draw. Like I was like the kid in school who knows how to draw, and that was like I built my identity on that. I know how to draw. So of course I was always in love with cartoons and animation. And for some weird reason, I sort of steered away from that as I was getting older. I think at some point, because I play music and I love music as well, and I love filmmaking. So I figured at some point I had like so many interests. I wanted to get into something that could sort of, include all of them, or at least as many as I could. And at some point, someone gave me what I think now is pretty bad advice, but at the time it sounded great, which was your thing should be advertising. Because if you're working like as a creative in an advertising agency, you have like TV ads and like jingles and photography with billboards, and like you have all of that. But I actually out of school, I started studying advertising. Because I thought that was great, because that sort of summarized everything I wanted to do. But then pretty early on, I realized that when you're a creative in an advertising agency, you kind of don't get to do any of that stuff. Like you might come up with it, but someone else does it for you. Someone else takes the picture, or someone else, records the song, which is deciding what sort of the idea for it is. And I also discovered that I hate advertising. it was just something that I realized. I mean, I guess I don't hate it, but it felt like it felt like if I was selling my art cheap by doing it to sell something else. It felt like there was a very not an honest way to sort of express what I wanted to express. So I at the time was working at a production company for advertising. I was doing storyboards for ad agencies as well. And I figured I liked the post-production side of things from working there. So I started studying animation with post-production in mind, actually. Like I figured I wanted to work in advertising, but not on the creative side of things, maybe on the actual production side of things. And as soon as I started studying animation, my first sort of class was some 2D stuff. And I realized, hey, like this is what I always really wanted to do. Like I wanted to draw. I did like storyboards because I like drawing, and I always felt like that stuff needed more motion. And I never really clicked with me that, hey, like all of this that you've always wanted to do, you can do it in animation, because animation has, from everything in filmmaking, plus drawing, plus music, depending on what you're doing, and there's a lot of rhythm involved in just creating movement. Like all of these things that you like are actually present here in animation. And that was a great aha moment that I kind of feel like got a little late, but that was just like a big eye-opening moment where I just said, yeah, this is what I want to do. So I finished my degree in animation back in Argentina, and yeah, I started out as a 2D animator. I worked as a 2D animator for about a year and a half, 2 years, on some pretty unlucky projects that never aired and that never saw the light of day. So I figured I might as well just make the jump to CG and see if that was a bit more lucky. And yeah, I worked in CG for a good 4 years, I think, as a generalist, and until I retrained with iAnimate. And after Animate, I actually was lucky enough to come straight to Sony. So
very cool. Now, did you do iAnimate in Argentina at the time still?
I did, yeah.
Okay, wow, that's fantastic. That's one of the unique opportunities, again, just being all over the world to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's fantastic. What about you, Stephen?
Well, I've been into animation since I was young, like, most people. Not most people that come into animation. I think it's because my mom, she used to like buy all the VHSs for us and pretty much collect every animated movie. So that kind of started my love for animation. And then when I was in high school, I never really like thought about it as a career. And then in high school, a teacher made us write a paper on a career. And that's when it like kind of clicked with me that that's what I wanted to do. And after that, I kind of like lost sight of it throughout high school, got interested in other things, kind of interested in music. I was doing like Photoshop stuff. But then like when the time came to apply to college, that's when I was like, oh yeah, animation. I was a terrible student too. Yeah. I was a terrible student too. So it's like, I don't know. I didn't really apply myself to like my studies. I went to an American Studies high school.
Okay.
But I always like loved to do art, which like didn't really click. So I found a college that accepted me for like my art portfolio. And then I just went there. I went through the entire program, got my bachelor's degree. And like towards the end of it, I realized that I didn't really know what I was doing in animation. I could do like a bunch of little stuff here and there, but the projects I was doing, we had to like start from scratch every time. So I was like designing the character, building modeling the character, rigging it, and then I wouldn't have like any time to animate at the end. So it's just like I was terrible at animation, which is what I really wanted to do. And from there, I knew I wanted to go to like another school. And I used to listen to your guys' podcast back then. So I knew like it was like between you or Animation Mentor. And I started at Animation Mentor for 4 classes and then switched over to you guys. Because I don't think their teaching style worked for me. So when I switched over, that's when like everything started to really click. So I took you guys from workshop 3 to workshop 7 and got my first internship at Frame Store when I was in workshop 6, like right before workshop 7 started. So I was like finishing up school as I was like doing my internship and
Wow.
then doing my first like couple contracts. So it was like, it's kind of rough, but I think, I think, you know, working 40 hours a week, like doing it full time really helped out.
Mm.
Cause it was just like, I was getting so much practice in. Is like, that's what I really needed, was to do it for 40 hours a week and not like be working a part-time job and then going home and then animating like all night or all weekend.
Right.
I just needed to put the time in, really, to get where I wanted to be.
Now, that's just really, really cool. The fact that you came across iAnimate, listened to the podcast, and yet now here you are.
Yeah.
In a podcast.
Yeah, it's kind of surreal.
It is cool. It is really cool. And Humberto, I got to tell you, when I reached out to Steven via Twitter about doing the podcast for the movie, he goes, I said, hey, is there any other iAnimate guys who worked on it? And he mentioned, he goes, oh, Humberto. He goes, he was my lead, and he goes, he was the best lead I could have asked for, you know? And so that's just, it's just really cool to be able to, you know, I've been with iAnimate since the get-go. I'm actually now taking another class right now. I'm taking a class with Tal. I just need to kind of brush up on some new stuff. And it's really just a neat industry to be in, to hone our skills, to hear, you know, here Steven is now on a podcast, talk about one of our other alumni, you, Humberto, who was his lead, and goes, man, that could have asked for a better lead. So it's really just kind of cool how things kind of come around full circle, or where you guys end up on. So that's just a neat thing.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Man, Steven made my job easy. As a lead. I think I've told him that a good couple of times. I think he knows how much I appreciate his work on that movie, because he killed it.
Well,
so
Thank you.
it was, and I got to ask you, Steven, how cool was it to work on that shot? And what's the title of that sequence or that shot?
Meet Miles Morales?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To have that out the gate, man, as an introduction for the movie. When you showed it online, that was just phenomenal. And then I went to actually go see it afterwards, and to know that was at the beginning as an introduction to him, it was just like, dude, could you have asked for a cooler shot to have worked on?
Not really.
I mean, that just set the tone for the whole movie and for him. And I'm going, you got that one out the gate, and just, as Humberto said, just, you know, knocked it out of the park. So
Yeah.
What a cool opportunity.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually got that shot at the end. Like, I wrapped that shot up when I was leaving.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was my last shot on the show.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
we
Go ahead.
waited on that shot because we knew it was a huge shot. It was an important one. It was one that we needed to really nail. And it was hard we kind of found the style of the movie as we were going. Like, we knew what the style overall was,
Mhm.
but we were leaving some of the most challenging stuff sort of for later.
Okay.
So we could really know what we were doing, basically.
Really how to nail that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one shot that was sort of left there just so we could, up until we weren't ready. Like, we were waiting to be ready to really tackle that and be sure that we could nail it.
Okay.
And when the time came, like, it wasn't hard to decide like who had to do it. It was like, this guy, Steve. He's like.
Now let me ask you this, because this is this is your first feature, right, Steven?
Yeah.
So like you said, the deciding factor, this is a big important shot. A guy this is his first feature, and not only does he nail it, but I mean, like, how is that decided there? Were you just doing really well in your other shots and going, yeah, this is the guy now? You proved yourself, or how did that work?
Yeah. So I started off pretty slow on the show, and I don't know, like, I did like one errand shot to start off with, and just like getting used to the style is like, I don't know, if you're coming from, like, I was coming from VFX, so it was like kind of difficult to like get used to the more stylized aspect of the show.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was a really slow buildup, because after that I started getting a little bit more mild shots. It was like spread out through the movie too. It wasn't like, you know, sequential or anything.
Right.
It was just like mild shots here and there. And I think I really connected with the character because I'm from New York, from one of the outer boroughs of New York. I also went to specialized high school. Miles went to, a private school, but it's like kind of the same thing.
Okay.
A charter school he went to.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just connected with him like on a lot of different levels. He's a mixed kid. I'm a mixed guy from the Bronx. So it's like, I don't know, like all these things are lining up, and I was
Like,
just
Miles,
like,
take the Miles shot. You're Miles.
So I was just like, I don't know. At first, when I came on, other people were doing really well with Miles, so I was like, oh, that's like done with. I think I might try to do well with like other characters. But as the show went on, I started getting more and more Miles stuff until, the very end when I was blessed with that opening shot.
Seriously, that was way cool. Like I said, you just had showed it online and it was just blown away. And then to be able to sit down and like, dude, this is at the intro, this is out the gate. That was really, really a unique opportunity to get that shot. That's just, and like I said, the fact that you nailed it too. It wasn't, very cool.
Yeah.
Humberto, from your vantage point, being his lead, what were some of the unique aspects on such a shot like that was that important? Working Steven through.
Well, I mean, at that time, like by the time we started doing that shot, I think we had like pretty sort of smooth workflow between us and with Josh, the anime supervisor, and with Bob. So I think we kind of knew how to do it. We had done like quite a lot of shots with Miles, and Steve at that point was like one of our go-to guys for anything Miles. Even like he shot a lot of reference for other people. So it was kind of good timing and as he said, like a slow build-up, because he started doing like smaller shots and we started sort of getting to know each other with smaller shots and then little bigger shots, and eventually by the time we got to that, I knew I could just rely on him to get the animation done. We could just discuss the acting, the ideas, the structure of the shot, but it wasn't about, timing or spacing or any of the technicalities. It was just what do we want to feel, what we want to communicate, sort of the overall choreography of it. And I knew he understood the character. I knew he understood what's on model, what's not on model. And it just made things run pretty smoothly, which was great.
How was your process, Humberto, working up to a lead there? How long had you been with Sony before you got moved into that position?
Not too long. I've been at Sony now for 3 years and a half-ish, maybe a little less.
How many did you say?
Three and
okay.
Almost and a half. So my first show here was Storks. And I almost immediately out of Storks started on Spider-Man. So I worked on Storks for about a year. And I moved on to Smurfs, but I was in Smurfs only for like a couple of weeks because I was immediately taken out of that to do the original, like the very early tests for Spider-Man. So I was basically I did well in Storks, and the anim supervisor, Josh Beveridge, he was the same anim soup for Storks and Spider-Man. Okay. He liked my work on Storks, so he got me into doing those Spider-Man tests. And basically, I was on the show. They ended up redesigning the characters. Like those early tests were with older designs that basically got redesigned. So we had a bit of a gap between they got remodeled and re-rigged, and we could actually start animating again with the new models.
Okay.
So I spent that time on Emoji. But basically, as I got back to Spider-Man, I was the first animator on there doing the tests. So we got back to it. We kept doing more tests with the new designs. And Josh was happy with my work and made me a lead. So,
awesome.
I mean, I still am blown away by the opportunity, because I mean, I didn't have that much experience. I mean, I had quite a few years of experience, but not in feature films and not in big studios like this.
Right.
So I felt comfortable with being able to tackle it, but at the same time, it was pretty intimidating as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was crazy, and luckily it turned out to be all right.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I guess that's the reason why I was asking that, because we've had, like I said earlier, we had our last podcast was with Simon Otto, and he was at DreamWorks for 20 something years, And you guys are both relatively young in this here. So it's just neat to see that gap. But yet here, Humberto, you were lead on a crazy cool movie. Stephen, you got one of the very important shot this year, first feature. So it's just a really neat opportunity to hear that kind of background and that story. And I'm assuming, just as you guys have mentioned, that hard work and being able to prove yourself just paid off. So that's very, very cool.
Yeah. That's one of the things. Go ahead.
Well, it seems like Sony's they're pretty good about giving new people shots, and shots as in chances to prove themselves, not like actual shots.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, as long as you do well, like they'll give you like a chance to do like a bigger shot. And I don't think if you do too poorly on a shot, you won't like be knocked back to like do like really terrible shots. You might have to like do a couple more like smaller shots to build your way back up again, but they seem more liberal with the work that needs to get done.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, it feels like a super friendly place to be a newcomer. It doesn't feel like you need to pay, any sort of,
dues.
Exactly. Anyone can get a good shot, and if you're doing good work, you got to get better shots. And no one's, pressuring you to keep that up. If someone does poorly on something, or someone's struggling with a shot, the whole idea of the team is to build that animator's confidence back again, so they can do good work again.
That's interesting that you guys kind of said that, because as I was talking with my brother Daryl, who's one of our alumni as well and business partner of mine, I was kind of looking at when Spider-Man had first came out on this here, and I kind of felt like Sony was really the only one who could have done something like this. I don't mean technically, but I mean as far as being adventurous. I look at like, and it kind of seems like, each studio has their own little niche or their own uniqueness about them. And Sony seems to be kind of the one who's been willing to push the boundaries a little bit. I remember with Cloud with a Chance of Meatballs. When that first came out, that was a very push style for CG. We hadn't seen anything like that, quite yet. And then something along this line. So it just seems like Sony's, I guess, a little more risky or willing to take risk. And it kind of even goes back to what you're talking about, even for the artist to be willing to go, you've proven yourself, let's jump on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, I mean, it's not a coincidence that Cloudy and Spider-Man are both also Chris and Phil, who I think they're really great at having, first of all, good ideas, and also very eager to push boundaries and not settle with what we know works. But yeah.
Now, you mentioned you were early on in this development. How early was the comic book style settled? Was that from the get-go, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was always the goal.
Okay.
They were never going for something normal.
Okay.
It did take quite a long time to sort of find what the style actually was, but the ambitious goal of doing something that you've never seen before, doing something that really feels inspired in comic books and that breaks as many rules as we possibly can, that was the mission statement from day one. Yeah. Which was, no pressure.
Yeah. Now, Stephen, how you mentioned it was kind of a slow learning curve for you, kind of adjusting from VFX to something like this. Can you tell us about, kind of walk us through that process? Did you have guys like Humberto to be able to kind of keep walking you along, or how did that work, learning this?
I don't know. I think I just have a slow ramp up. Because I have a slow ramp up on this show too. It's like, I don't know, still trying to get a hold of the style. But when I first came in, I got like really small shots. They were everyone that came in got to do like a background character, so it wasn't really a crowds team or anything.
Okay.
I think for a while, and then we got one later on. But yeah, so we started off with that, and then I got to do some like flashlight animation. And then I didn't like want them to think that I was spending like really little time on it, so I might have spent a little too much time.
When you say flashlight animation, what do you mean?
When he's in the tunnel.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't
Like
quite sure if that was
yeah.
like a term. Okay.
Yeah.
No, literal
Like
flashlight.
literal,
Yeah. Okay.
And I was like, yeah.
If
So I
that
was
was a
just like,
Sony
yeah,
term or something.
I was like, yeah, I'm gonna kill this flashlight animation. Yeah. And then I just spent like, I think too long on it. And then after that, I think it was more so getting used to the rigs.
Okay.
Getting used to the rigs, also getting used to the stepped animation, and like kind of deciding what my workflow is going to be for the show. When I first got on, I was like, oh, it's on 2, so I'm just going to break it down like the entire time. I'm just going to like be in step and just like keep breaking it down until I'm on 2s. And then Humberto was like, hey man, don't do that.
Okay, so why? Why wouldn't you do that? That seems kind of a logical, if it's going to be on 2s, kind of put it in. Yeah. So what was the methodology in not doing that? What had you learned?
So,
well,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, so it was just, it's faster to go into Spline, and then after that, bake it on 2s.
Okay.
And then from there, you can clean up the spacing. So once like he told me that, it was like, oh, okay, so I could just do my normal workflow, and then you don't even have to polish, or I didn't have to polish that much before I went into stepped again.
Okay.
Because then you're really polishing once you're back in stepped, and then sometimes things are they're not snappy enough, so you have to like tighten the curves. Sometimes like if you're trying to do like a really nice ease, it'll like hit a wall.
Okay.
So you just like tap it back down.
Yeah.
Now,
I got to give it a little shout out here. We had because you said, you adjust the curves. I had a graph editor on Twitter. His question was, or its question was, why didn't you let me help? So there's a shout out to a graph editor.
Yeah. Graph editor. That's my boy.
We tried.
So we have it here on the podcast that there was use of the graph editor. So there you go, a graph editor.
Yeah, I don't know if that was everyone's workflow, but I think for a lot of people.
Okay.
That's what they did. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that we discovered sort of early on. Our first instinct was exactly that. I mean, if we're going to work on 2s, we're trying to avoid things feeling spliny and archy, and that's the whole reason for using 2s. We don't want it to feel like the usual CG. We don't want it to feel like super polished.
Mm-hmm.
We want that sort of hand-drawn, handcrafted feel.
Right.
And that texture. So the first test that I did was with Peter, and I did that. Like I just made a step blocking, and I started breaking it down, and it became really hard to get subtle acting to work. When we start doing that, you sort of lose track of every single control, and you start finding that you just have like flat tangents all over the place, and it's hard to sort of keep your curves together, and hard to keep your animation from looking too disjointed and too blocky. And then we had we had 2 tests. It was a dialogue shot of Miles and Peter talking to each other, and we approached both with different workflows. I did the Peter one, trying to just always work in step and see how that worked.
Mm-hmm.
And Julie Bernier-Gosselin, she was another one of her leads, and she had the Miles shot, and she did the spline and baking into 2s workflow, and she got so much faster, so much better results. That it's like it didn't work right away. If it's something in spline, you bake it down to 2s. It wasn't exactly what we were looking for, but it allowed you to just go right into like polishing those 2s instead of worrying about getting something to look sort of smooth enough.
Okay.
I was just really struggling with that, and yeah, that was really informative because it was kind of counterintuitive in a way, and we were kind of, at least for me, I almost thought that we were doing it to rule out that we didn't want to do it in Spline and we wanted to do it instead, and it ended up being completely the other way around. So yeah, that was super informative, and actually, like, that's something that I keep doing. I'm back to working on Nuanced now in the show I'm working at, and it's still like, it's kind of amazing if you have a shot. Say you do your normal blocking in step, and you just spline it, and you clean up that spline just barely. So you have something that's pretty floaty, pretty ugly, but it's in the ballpark of what your spline is going to look like. If you have that on twos, it's so much more forgiving. It's amazing how much your brain sort of fills in the missing details with the right information and not like the floaty spline information. So now I like just blocking in spline a lot. I like working layered a lot as well. And it's pretty efficient for me to just do like a quick spline blocking that looks floaty and ugly, and just break it down to twos and show it like that. Because it looks much more similar to what the end result is going to look like.
Right. Okay.
So once, I mean, if you're showing that to a director or a supervisor, they get a pretty clear idea of what you're going for. Then you have to grab your curves and actually clean them up.
Right.
And you never use your baked to twos version, but baking to twos, sort of to quickly putting some makeup on ugly splines is something that I'm totally doing. I think I'm doing from now on because it's great.
It's easy to show and kind of get your to buy off, right?
Totally.
Okay.
I actually saved. I'm doing a shot now where I saved the bake to twos version just so they can have it and compare what I'm cleaning up my splines with and sort of see one next to the other. Because it's kind of amazing how much better it looks when you just strip down every other frame.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Which is something I wasn't expecting at all.
Now, are you guys using something internal from Maya, or is this something developed within Sony for breaking down the animation?
Yeah. We had a couple of tools. I actually wrote a couple of them.
Wow.
So, because our idea was to not mess with people's workflows. We really wanted people. I mean, it was already a hard show to get to figure out. We're working with a lot of new things, like 2D inclines and all this stuff. So we didn't want to, on top of that, force people to work differently than they usually do.
Right.
So yeah, we made a bunch of tools that basically allowed you to work however you wanted, and then just preview how it would look like on whatever you wanted. Twos, threes, fours, mix of twos and ones. You could just show that for review or keep it up for yourselves before you actually commit it to baking it down to that.
Okay, gotcha. Kind of going back to some of what you're talking about here, what were some of the additional things that animators had to learn? Were some of the effects, wobble, or you guys didn't use motion blur, but some of the blurring techniques, was that something that the animators handled, or was that something that was post?
Well, there was a mix of both.
Okay.
I think overall, most of it was all done in animation.
Okay.
We did have some of the lines of the face. I mean, anything that was expressive was handled in animation.
Okay.
Everything that was really either just lines that were describing just form, like the bridge of the nose, so stuff like that. We didn't have to like hand animate that. But most of it, if not almost all of it, was handled in animation. We did have a couple of tools and a couple of different options, from like 2D hand-drawn lines to like geometric shapes, and tools for doing like multiple limbs and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's pretty wide sort of menu of things you could choose from, and creatively you could just do your shots however you wanted. That was pretty cool.
Okay, so it was kind of left up to the animator on how those were handled then.
Yeah.
Okay, so would a director, Steven, for example, or maybe a lead, see that and go, no, we might not. We've used that on the shot beforehand. Let's kind of mix it up, or no, that works right into the next or the shot before or after. How is that handled?
I'd say they gave us a lot of freedom on the first pass.
Okay.
So like to show how we wanted things to look, and if they didn't feel that it was right for the moment, then they would like bring it back say,
Okay.
oh, maybe that multiple doesn't work there, or that line work doesn't work in this section. But I feel like we were given a lot of freedom in terms of whenever we first showed, then we could just like kind of do what we wanted.
Was that fun being creative, or was it kind of daunting going, okay, what do I do here?
Pretty daunting. Like I'm not, I don't draw. So
Okay.
I used to like try to draw when I was younger, and then I gave that up pretty early. So it was hard for me to get used to like drawing the shapes on the faces and just like coming up with nice appealing shapes.
Okay.
That's
What
when
about
Humberto came in.
the little tap on the neck that give the little?
Oh yeah. So I had to like hand draw that.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I hand drew that, and then they also like kind of like a spark, so it kind of like dissipates as it goes out. So I had to like hand animate that too.
So is that geometry that's there, or do you guys use like something like grease pencil, or?
So we can use a pencil tool to draw a curve.
Okay.
And then we can use that curve to create geometry.
Okay.
So all those lines that you see in there are actual geometry in the scene.
And just use what you drew, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's cool because like your actual, like I drew that with my hand.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And one of the things that, I was never, I mean, like I have a big stack of comic books. My kids ask me, oh, I was in college, the library was getting rid of them, and they were like, seriously, like 5 cents each. I'm like, yes, I just grab a bunch because I love the artwork. So I was never a big kid growing up reading comic books. I love the artwork because it's that kind of what we do here in animation, but so it's got that motion, but I can see where you're adding these kind of stuff, and it's like, hey, I'm drawing a comic book right here,
Yeah.
Do you guys have like reference that you guys look back to, other comic books that are sitting right there? You're like, hey, let me see what they did here, or how did that work for you? Like you said, you didn't draw a whole lot growing up. Where'd you get the inspiration to do that kind of stuff? For that moment just shot.
For that moment, I think that language was established since it was like later in the show. That language was established like earlier on in the show. So I've seen people do that that particular motion, but use those lines to describe something before.
Okay.
So I just thought it would be a cool moment to use that.
Okay. What about you, Humberto? Did you familiar with comic books kind of growing up, and you're like, oh man, this is old hat, or like I have to kind of go through some of this kind of stuff and see what they did here, or?
Yeah. No, yes, I was. I never like read a lot of comic books growing up, but I did. There was a lot. I was very into the drawings of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. For some reason, I might be wrong, but I think in Argentina back in like the 90s, there weren't a lot of comic books around. But I did like the artwork a lot, and we did have early on in the show a lot of meetings about good comic book influences and bad comic, like what the kind of comic books that we wanted to reference, and the kind of comic books that we kind of wanted to not avoid, but that were not in our graphic language,
right?
And not in our design rules. And we did have Josh especially made like a huge, pretty extensive list of breaking down different comic book styles and like comic book like impact lines and speed lines and expressions and everything that he wanted to achieve, or at least he wanted us to try. I think that was pretty that was available to the team, but that was very like they really pushed for us leads to sort of share that. If you ever had someone who's working on a shot, just go through this and suggest what kind of things could work, or where could they find inspiration, stuff like that.
Now, was the movie all on 2s, or was there moments where you guys say, we put these on 1s, or how did that work?
We had everything. The main, I guess the rule was it needs to look not stroby, it needs to not look choppy and unfinished, and it needs to look like something that you could watch on an IMAX screen and not get a headache.
Okay.
So from then on, like if you wanted to, have it on 2s and have a lot of smears, or just having it on 1s. I mean, without motion blur, even 1s feel a little bit crisper and snappier than with motion blur on.
True. Yeah.
So even with real fast motion, if you have that on ones, it might still strobe because you might have like very big spacing gaps across the screen. So there was a lot of everything. I think the only thing we knew is we wanted to avoid feeling spliny and mush and like over interpolated, I guess.
Gotcha.
We wanted to capture that the texture that the twos sort of make you feel.
Okay.
And so it was depending on the shot, it was addressed in different ways.
Now, how was the quota for shots any different? Did you find that you had to polish, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but polish less because you were on different twos and ones and things like that, or was it any different, I guess, as far as quota time frame, however time it took you to do a shot like that?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was a different, like, we're kind of the same amount of time, at least in my case. I felt like I would spend the same amount of time just working on different things.
Okay.
Because there would be a lot of work in polishing especially if you were doing like a close-up acting shot, like getting all the inclines to work and all the lines in the face and like all that kind of stuff might need a lot more polish than your usual shot. But then if you're working on twos, you might not have to work on your spline, and your curves as much.
Right.
You still have to polish it. So like I think it balances out because it's like it's less. I don't say less complexity on the body animation side, just because you're in twos, but it is a little less work if you're in twos and you know how to handle it.
Gotcha.
But it's a lot more work because sometimes you might be on twos and it might be faster to get your shot to look good and weighty and spacing to work and everything. But then you have crazy strobing because you're moving from one side to the other, or the camera is doing a weird thing. So you have to figure out a creative way for that to work. And it can be tricky because sometimes if you have a shot that's like half of the shot is in twos, half the shot is in ones, you totally see the transition. And if half the shot is in ones, then the half that's in twos looks unfinished.
Okay.
So you can't have you can't just go like, oh, whatever, in this part I just put it in ones. You need to be really efficient and careful with what you're having on ones, what you're having in twos, because it can be kind of deceiving, and it can sort of make the shot more complicated than it actually looks like. So there was a lot of time put on things that you might not have to worry about in any other show.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I think it's the same amount of time working on a shot, just on different things.
Okay. And you found the same thing, Stephen, to be true, or was your experience a little different?
Well, I had no real experience with how long shots should take.
Okay, yeah.
So I was just relying on Humberto to tell me when to finish up.
Okay.
Sometimes, yeah. So, I mean...
Did you find time management to be pretty straightforward for you, or did you find that a bit of a challenge, or how'd that work then?
I didn't find it challenging. It seemed like most of my shots were like a 5-day bid day.
Okay.
Sometimes went a little longer depending on the complexity of the shot, but most of them took that, and I never at any point really felt that much pressure.
Okay.
It's just like if you like final on a Friday and it has to go out that week, then it's like, oh, okay, damn. I gotta do some overtime.
Gotta hustle a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm gonna jump in a couple questions because they kind of tie into this a little bit. So, and guys, I'm sorry, some of these are asked from people on Twitter and Facebook, so sometimes their names are just, it is what it is. So this is from Cam, the Space Kid. It says, what was your favorite part of the movie to have worked on, and what was your favorite part that you didn't work on? So we'll start with you, Stephen. So what was your favorite part of the movie that you worked on?
Well, my favorite part was the opening shot of Miles.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my favorite. And then I really wanted to work on the last, or the boss battle sequence. Just because it just seemed so crazy and ridiculous, and there were just like so many cool fight shots and choreography in that sequence. It would have been like amazing to work on.
Now, okay, I want to ask a question on that one. How was that choreographed? Because the camera's kind of all over. There's and I'm not going to have any spoilers. I hate spoilers, so I would try to keep it as spoiler free as I can. But there's no real point of reference per se. It's kind of in this space type atmosphere, we'll say. How did that work? I mean, it would seem like it'd be a little bit challenging to have worked on with no point of reference to a certain degree, and this camera kind of moving and panning. And have you guys worked on those, or saw some of the shots and saw some of the challenges, or was it pretty straightforward and I'm kind of overthinking it?
Yeah, no, I think we shared that, like all of the third act battle. I think we shared that amongst all the leads and all the teams. It was pretty challenging, but at the same time, like I don't think the camera blocking was the biggest challenge, because we did work with just an environment. You just don't see that environment in the end results. You just see like all that abstract background.
Yeah,
but we
right.
did have sort of points of reference and an actual environment that we were working with, so we knew where we were and like what was cutting to what, and it wasn't just up in the air.
Okay.
Then it was up to lighting to figure out how the colors on the abstract backgrounds actually don't feel disorienting. But yeah, I feel that wasn't that much of a headache.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Humberto, same question to you. What was your favorite part of the movie to have worked on? And now, hindsight, looking at it, what was your favorite part that you didn't get maybe a chance to work on?
Well, I can tell you, I would have loved to work on everything that Julie did. Julie was, her team, and she was basically, she did all of the sad stuff and all the dramatic stuff and everything without spoiling things. If you ever, if you find yourself crying watching the movie, that's one of her sequences.
That's Julie who?
Bernier Gosselin.
Okay.
I hope I'm pronouncing her last name right. It's French Canadian, so Bernier Gosselin.
Okay, gotcha. All right. I was looking to give people credit where credit's due. So if you're Julie, you're getting credit here.
But at the same time, like I would not dare to interfere with Julie's work. Like, she's just so amazing at what she does that I would not like. I mean, I wish I could have worked on that stuff, but at the same time, I'm so glad that she did, and because that's why it ended up, looking the way it does.
Very cool.
And as for favorite stuff, I think I was character lead for Miles, and everything. I feel like I really enjoyed everything that was Miles related. I didn't get to animate as much. I had a couple of shots with him. And I like most of the work I did for Miles was on like building library stuff and like doing behind the scenes stuff to help other people. But I did get like a lot of the sequences where Miles is just being himself and being, fun and charming, like, Steven's shot. And that opening sequence, him with his uncle, him with his dad on the police car, like all of that stuff. I found it was, incredibly satisfying to work with.
Okay, I gotta ask a quick question. Who did the shot where Miles puts his hand on? He's like, "Hey."
I animated one of those. I think that one, like the very first one, where he goes like, "So walk up to her and be like, hey," and not really. That one was mine.
Okay, because my 6-year-old daughter, she loved that part, and there's times I'm just like leaving to go to work. She's like, Daddy, I gotta tell you something. I already know what's coming, but I've been down, and she's like putting her hand, and she just giggles. So that was just a great shot. So I had to find out who did that one.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah, that sequence was fun. I mean, that one was one of the first sequences that we did, where we were, at least I was scared of just tackling that, because we hadn't done any or much like subtle acting, just two guys talking, that kind of stuff. We did a lot throughout the movie, and the movie I think has a lot of really successful just casual conversations.
Yeah.
But at the time, that was one of the first sequences where we were dealing with something like this, and the kickoff for it was like, we want to make this feel like nothing you've seen in an animated movie. This has to feel like almost live action, but be super stylized and be very animated, but very grounded and relatable. It was like, oh, holy crap, okay. No big deal.
Yeah. Well, the cool part about this movie too is that I had a chance this last week to go to a charter school and just kind of give a short lecture on animation. And so someone asked me about this movie, and I'm like, oh, it was fantastic, this and that. And the thing I was able to talk with them about was that I said, one of the things in our industry is story is king, So I said, the idea with just these visuals here, I said, without the story, it would have been just a neat trick, type deal. The cool part about this movie, though, is it had everything: the visuals, the animation, the lighting, the story. It just again, it knocked it out of the park, like you said there. We wanted it to look like this, and you go, and you guys did it, and it's just a very, very unique film to be able to have worked on, I'm sure. So yeah, congrats.
Thanks, man. Yeah, absolutely it is. And it was great to feel like the momentum building. We struggled with it for quite some time. Like it didn't work out from the get-go, and we spent a lot of time like in fear of like, will this ever work? What the hell are we doing? We always knew we had something special with the potential of being great, but at the same time, like whenever you're trying, it's always scary to be outside of your comfort zone and to try
absolutely.
different things. And yeah, for a long time, we didn't know if it was going to work, and we knew we liked what we were doing, and we were like excited about it, but not really sure if it was actually going to work out. So yeah, it was great, and it's amazing now that the thing is done and it works. Yeah. But it was quite a long time of a lot of stressful decisions. Josh Beveridge, he has in a couple of interviews, he said something that I love, which is that he realized after this that in art, if you're scared, it means you're doing something valuable, and different, and you're pushing at least your own personal boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really get better if you're not doing something that challenges you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like there's a deceiving calm in being right inside your comfort zone and not moving out of that.
Yeah.
And it's great that this was able to sort of push that in so many different levels.
Yeah. I want to keep going with some of these questions. These are great answers, though. I got to tell you, there's a couple here I want to give a shout out here because you guys might know them. Taryn Lack.
Tarun. Yeah.
Okay. So his question is, how do you get to be so awesome?
By being friends with Tarun Lack.
There you go.
Yeah, I actually sat in the same pod as him. So
okay. Very cool.
I would just look over my shoulder and see whatever he was doing.
Oh, so maybe this was his kind of end to kind of go, well, yeah, like, you guys, you're giving him credit here.
That was a crazy talented part, because Steven was doing like that big Miles shot next to Leandro Martins, who was doing the following super one-hour long shot of Miles, like getting ready for school. With his,
walking through.
Walking through the living room and taking a sip of the soup. And Tarun was working on Miles, like walking on his on the block in front of his school, like talking to his friends, which are all like monster long shots, super important, character building, perfect introduction of Miles, and they were all sitting next to each other. It was pretty great.
That's cool. All right, so having good people around you, that's how you become so awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, this was another one, guys. You guys might know Nick Kondo.
I don't know him.
Okay.
Who's that? No idea.
Who's that guy?
Well, I hope you know, because he said Steven. No. He said, Steven, when you were acting out your shots for Miles, how did you approach the character? Were you being yourself or playing a character? Some combination of the two? Did you study other actors or musicians?
I think it was a combination of the two, because we discussed earlier that I felt really connected to Miles. I felt like we shared a lot in common. But also he's a 12, 13-year-old kid. Yeah. So I'm a grown man.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
you got to go back to your youth and think about that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But specifically for the opening shot, what I really wanted to do was I was aiming because I was really thinking about people from New York in the audience, and I wanted them to like see Miles and like how he was like grooving to the music, and I wanted to like connect with that and like, oh yeah, like he's a kid from Brooklyn.
He's from Brooklyn,
New York, yeah.
yeah.
So that was like my main goal for that shot, or one of my main goals for that shot was just to like, I really wanted to go to like New York and actually watch the movie with an audience there. I didn't get to, but I wanted them to like feel that part.
Gotcha. That's cool. Did you have to listen to rap for the first time? And I was just kidding. Like, what is this rap? Let me listen to some before. Oh yeah, I can dig this.
Yeah.
Let's see. Farley Fit kind of asked some similar questions about how you introduced Miles. How cool was that? Let me see here. Now, someone asked, this is Suzuki, said, what was your favorite scene to animate? I'm going to kind of hit this to you, Humberto, in regards to the Gwen one with her playing the drums. I noticed you mentioned that on Twitter that, you played the drums. Can you talk about that shot a little bit?
Sure, yeah. That was a great shot to animate. And it was way more challenging than I ever anticipated. Mm-hmm. Like, I actually thought it would be just like a fun shot that I could just, I mean, it wasn't like, I wasn't really, I didn't do a lot of work with Gwen. I hadn't animated her before. I wasn't the lead of that sequence. I was just, I figured, well, this is a fun shot that I can just, get on, just enjoy doing, because I like drumming. I play drums. And I think it probably was the most challenging shot of the whole movie for me. Because there's a very tricky thing when you have, like, if you see footage of a drummer with, real life motion blur, drumsticks are just a blur. You never see a single, drumstick there. Same thing with arms. And if you start thinking, like I was, about the actual technique or what you're actually doing with your hands, that's going to be just impossible to read if you're animating it, even on once without motion blur. Because it's just too much motion, and it just feels like everything's just blinking. Because you can't track any of the sticks or the arms, so you can't really follow what's happening. And it ended up being so tricky to actually get it to work and feel like, because I really wanted it to feel like there was some proper technique, like drumming technique,
gotcha.
Behind it. I feel that's like Julie came to me and she said, well, I have this drumming shot. I know you play drums. I know you would probably love to animate it. And she also knew that if someone else did it, I would annoy the hell out of that person with like, that's not how you play drums. That's wrong technique. So I think
she was going to kill two birds with one stone there, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, that was an amazing shot to animate, and I feel like I dreamed about animating drumming for a long time. But honestly, like while I was doing it, it was painful. It was painful to actually get it to work, and it wasn't working. I was just trying different things, and it didn't work. And I was just, why did I even accept this? Luckily, it ended up working. And it was actually, I showed it with no, like I hand drew like all the smears and multiples just as a preview, like, okay, this is my plan, this is what I'm planning on doing. And it got approved that way, which was great. But then I had to spend like a long time actually making that I had drawn into like a real thing with real, renderable geometry. But yeah, that was a super fun shot. And it's crazy that like from all the stuff that I did in the movie, it's really the one that I struggle with the most by far.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Quick question. When you guys said you guys drew this stuff here, how did that work as far as, you guys ever have mouse or tablets, or how did that work sharing? Or, because that would seem like a lot of tablets for a lot of artists. I mean, how did that work?
A lot of tablets for a lot of artists.
Okay. Okay. All right. Just curious when you mentioned that. We had a couple questions. Alex Wilson asked, and these are kind of, someone kind of condense it here, but what are some special aspects of the movie's rigs that you wish more rigs had? So what were some of the uniquenesses about the rigs that you guys found that you haven't seen before?
To me, the rigs weren't that different than what I've seen. Well, what I saw at like Frame Store.
Okay.
Yeah.
But as far as the abilities to multiple limbs and smear frames on those, or
yeah, those are like proprietary tools that Sony developed. So
gotcha.
I think, yeah, a lot of the stuff that you see that's like crazy limbs, and then the ink lines, stuff like that, is like the tools. It's just extra tools on top of the rigs that we're using. Yeah.
No, there's on the attribute, and you're having to scroll through and kind of find it, or I mean, was it pretty easy with they have a UI that worked well for you guys?
Yeah, I don't know whether you want to talk more about it.
I would just add 2D lines on every character's face ever. Like, I think 2D lines on faces are the best. Yeah, I miss having 2D lines on the character's face on the show I'm working on now. It's that to me was something I didn't expect. It would change. It would open up sort of my animation brain so much. But that's something I would love and everything. But it's crazy how much, like, if you have neutral brows, just default neutral brows, and you just draw like a tension, like furrow in the middle, you automatically get like something that feels like a little bit of an angry brow. And if you, instead of doing those lines, do like a little, tension lines on the forehead, you automatically get like, the brows feel like they're tensioning like upwards, and it gives you. I felt like it gives you so much freedom. Just get little nuanced expressions that it's sometimes really hard to get with rigs, because you need like the formations to get that, but maybe with just a one well-placed line, you just communicate everything you need, or you just.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's something I'm really missing right now.
Yeah, to be able just to draw that little thing in there to really sell it, huh? That's a great point.
Yeah, there's some animators that actually use ink lines for crying.
Oh, okay.
Or like to use it as like a reflection in the eye to show someone who like they're tearing up.
Gotcha. Oh, very cool.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Huh. Kind of Chris, and I'm not going to even pronounce the last name, but I'm sorry, Chris S. So which other comics would you like to bring to the big screen with the same Spider-Verse style in mind? Kind of goes back to that other question here in regards to the rigs.
I'd say Batman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because, I think you could get really graphic with him.
And
he's so, like, his story focuses so much on night.
Good point.
It's like darkness. Yeah. I think you could get really graphic, and it would be pretty fun.
Cool.
Play with those shapes.
What do you think, Humberto?
Yeah. I mean, Batman would be awesome. I wouldn't do anything in Spider-Verse style. I would like try to find something completely different again. I go like, okay, this is Spider-Verse. Let's grab something else and see how we can do it with. I mean, if we were doing Batman, I would try to create a completely new style for Batman.
Okay, gotcha.
And not reuse the Spider-Verse stuff.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Batman would be actually pretty cool.
All right. Behind the Galaxy, again, these are crazy names, but on Twitter said, do you have any advice for aspiring animators? Enroll in iAnimate. There you go. Because that does go back to one of my other ones. Someone asked, I'd have to find it, but that was kind of the same question. How do you get better in animation? I'm like, so we have iAnimate.
Some other advice I would have is, I feel like my story is a story of persistence. Like, it took a long time for me to actually land a job in the industry, and it was just like, just having grit and knowing what I wanted to do.
That's
and
great,
just
man.
like sticking through it, working like a retail job just to like pay for school and then, live just to get here, So, be persistent and realize that you're not as good as you think you are and get some help.
There you go. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was one of the things I shared with, like I mentioned, that class. I said, there's no substitute for hard work. You have to be willing to put in the time. This is not an easy medium, So yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to add to that, like, it's not something that we're talking about earlier. Know that it's scary. Like, getting better and improving and challenging yourself usually it's not something that you enjoy that much. I know for me, it was hard to, I struggled a bit with the idea of I'm not comfortable while doing iAnimate, or like when I was faced with actual challenges, it was scary and it was nerve-wracking, and a lot of those times, like it took me a while to actually understand that that's how you get better. And I found that a lot of times I sort of went back to like my comfort zone, and what I was able to do that was just like very limited, but at least it was something that I knew I could handle. That I think is definitely something I would say to anyone who wants to be an animator. Maybe, I mean, that's advice for anything, but know that if you want to challenge yourself and grow in something, it's not easy, and it's kind of scary.
Gotcha.
To adventure outside of your comfort zone.
Embrace that a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
John Liang says, which of the three directors had the most say in the scenes you worked on? How did the feedback differ amongst the three directors?
For me, well, Bob Persichetti, is that how you say his last name?
Yep,
yeah.
Persichetti.
Yeah, so at a certain point, it was Bob and Peter who were doing all the anim rounds, and then I think somewhere in the middle, Bob started taking over more. So yeah, he did a lot more of like he gave a lot more notes on my shots, particularly.
Okay.
Yeah. Bob was definitely the anim guy. I think it took them a bit to sort of find the balance and what. I mean, they were all, of course, involved in everything, but
Yeah.
I think at first they were trying to figure out the balance of who was, more present in which areas, and Bob ended up being the anim guy. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. What about recording reference? You guys record much reference of yourselves for these shots? You guys rely heavily. And someone asked in one of the questions here about the storyboards. How did that, how much freedom did you guys have and things of that nature? So you guys speak about that a little bit. Storyboards versus your reference and bringing that into the final shot. Even once you run with it.
Yeah. A lot of the times the storyboards were just like a launching off point. I mean, I found that was like a launching off point, and then you can add your own flavor to the shot. And Bob was really good about, if you added an idea that wasn't there initially or how he saw it initially, he would like take a step back and try to like get whatever he had in his mind out, just to like take in what you were showing, which is really good. So yeah, I think on the show I am now, they're more into the boards.
Okay.
Than on Spider-Verse.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Humberto, what about you? Did you find the similar experience?
Yeah. I think we had a lot of freedom to plus the boards and not be sort of restricted by by them. We did shoot a lot of reference. It was the style of the show was pretty, observed, nuanced acting. Try to not be cartoony. Try to not be, I guess stereotypical. So there was a lot of reference involved for acting choices, not necessarily for actual motion, because we did stylized motion, and we did, even with having stuff on twos and trying to get, graphic design on those poses, you might steer away from what your reference are actually doing. But we did rely a lot on reference to get the acting done.
Okay. This one here is from Dominic. It says, if you were to work on a sequel, obviously for this one here, what would you do differently if given the chance in terms of animation style? What would you have maybe done differently?
I would try to get more action shots.
Okay.
Yeah, because I didn't get to do one. The closest one I got to do was Miles falling down.
Okay.
I was like mostly doing acting and like like pretty close up acting most of the time.
Very cool. Which is kind of funny because sometimes a lot of people will be like, oh, I want those juicy acting shots. But I could see where for a Spider-Man one, though, you're like, no, that'd be some fun body mechanics there for Spidey. So I got my represent my shirt here.
Oh, nice.
Had to put this one on for the podcast. What about you, Humberto?
I'm not really sure. I know I don't care about action shots. I'm all about acting. I love like selecting, and I'm so happy that I was able to work on like nuanced performance on this show. I would just try to find ways to polish and to go deeper in exploring all the tools and how much more could we refine motion and stylize smears. And I feel like we only, and we had a lot of design on that stuff, but at the same time we sort of built a lot of libraries as we went along. So I would try to tackle another show like this with grabbing everything we did on the first one and seeing what of that works best, and trying to really make sure we design all of that stuff even further.
Gotcha.
That's what I would try to do.
One of the things that I thought was so unique about this film too was there wasn't it didn't seem like, I'll say it this way, it didn't seem like there was a hard and fast rule across the board that everything kind of looked like this and that. There was times when the city in the background had the comic book blur effect, and then there was other times I'm going, man, that feels like it's like almost that photo real, you know? And so it just, even from a scene to a different scene, and not obviously back to back, but just at different times, that same scene might look very different. And so it was just a really cool visual as well. Did you guys find that challenging at different times, or just always just feel fresh, willing to venture out on some of that kind of stuff?
I always found it very, like, one thing that Bob and Peter were always saying in reviews, that they wanted the movie to be very subjective. It was about Miles's experience. It was about Miles's point of view, and like Bob a lot of time would say, like, I don't care about continuity. Like in CG, we a lot of time we're just preoccupied with, like, well, this character is running at this speed, so by this shot he's going to be travel like whatever distance, and so by this shot, and he was like, I don't care. Like, if Miles is scared, then the threat needs to look big, and you know, he was really into just subjective experience and how Miles was feeling. And I think a lot of that is reflected not just on camera framing and stuff like that, but like throughout the film. I think they really try to push the subjective part of this is Miles' story and this is how he's seeing the world. So you do get a lot of different sort of looking graphic styles that I feel that were sort of they're trying to represent that, you know, how the character is feeling in this particular scene. Gotcha. What the scene is trying to represent. It's just his POV.
Okay, very cool. I got to tell you, one of my favorite characters that was introduced, and hopefully this isn't a spoiler, but Doc Ock. I thought that was, because it took me by surprise. I think that's what was one of the coolest parts. I thought that was a really fun character. The noir one, really, really cool. And then obviously Gwen Stacy was a very neat character. Was there any favorites for you guys that you guys had?
I really like Penny.
Okay, yeah.
I think they handled her so it was so true to anime.
Uh-huh.
And there was even like a little part where it looked exactly like a manga.
Yeah.
Like a very small, like, I don't know, probably like 10 frames.
Uh-huh.
It's like a 10 frame section. I was like, oh my God, like, why isn't there more of that?
I guess that's kind of what I go back to, that here's one film, but at any given moment, it felt so different too at different times. So yeah, that's a great second. If it was for 10 seconds, it felt like a totally different movie, you know? What about you, Humberto?
Yeah, I mean, so you were saying favorite character. I feel like I'm just Team Miles all the way. Like, okay. I work with him so much, and I enjoyed it so much that I can't think of anyone else I would rather be working with. Just to give due credit, Penny and Ham, those were both the lead for those was Dylan Reed.
Okay.
Who's a master in cartoon stuff. He's just like, that guy is another one who I would love to do the stuff he does, but I would never dare to interfere with anything he's doing. And Penny and Ham had a lot of really complicated tools behind to get them to work. So yeah, that was a huge feat. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, guys, we've gone to at least our time here. I really appreciate you guys' input and just your time. I think, again, it's just, before I had a chance to see the movie, it was one of those things that people kept, from other studios would post, hey, I've seen it. Man, this is not just hype. This is legit. And so what a cool opportunity to be a part of something very unique and a staple, I think, in our animation history.
Like, I couldn't have asked for a better first feature to be on. Like, it's amazing. Like I said before, like, it took me a long time to break into the feature, and I don't know, I felt like it was worth the wait.
Very cool.
Because I got to be part of something extremely special.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, guys. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for waiting with me on the technical difficulties, but very cool podcast, and I appreciate your guys' input.
Thanks a lot.
Good luck, guys. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Bye.
Then you're left in the dust unless I stuck by